Shields up, Iron Breakers. Rurikhan here coming at you with another video, and it is finally time to once again talk about Dragon's Dogma 2. So we recently had some new gameplay footage over on the PlayStation Showcase. I'm going to be going over that footage with great scrutiny, trying to analyze everything that is shown to the best of my ability. You might be wondering why I haven't done this video sooner, and the reasoning is, at the time that this gameplay footage was revealed at the PlayStation Showcase, I was pretty busy with other projects here on the channel, and I wanted to make sure that I would take my time to make a video, a proper video about Dragon's Dogma, and therefore I decided to wait a little bit. And then eventually Capcom announced that they were going to be doing a showcase of their own, and so I figured, you know what, let's wait for the Capcom showcase, make sure that we get as much information as possible about the game before I go ahead and I do my video, because Dragon's Dogma is a game that pretty much since the very first moment I've ever played this game, which was a very long time ago, I was basically telling everybody that I knew, you got to play this game, you got to try this game out. This game is amazing, this game is awesome, and that has always been my stance when it comes to Dragon's Dogma. This is an extremely, highly anticipated sequel for me, so you just have no idea how important this whole thing is to me. And before we even get into this, some of you are going to be wondering, okay, Rurikhan, what's so special about the original Dragon's Dogma? Do I need to play it in order to understand Dragon's Dogma 2? And from what I remember of the story of the original Dragon's Dogma, which, by the way, technically speaking, it's kind of like two stories merged into one, because the only Dragon's Dogma that you can really get at this point is Dragon's Dogma Dark Arisen, which is kind of like, when you think about Dragon's Dogma and Dark Arisen, think about it like, you know, how you have Monster Hunter World, and then you have Monster Hunter World Iceborne. It's kind of the same thing, but it's not as smoothly done as Monster Hunter World and Monster Hunter World Iceborne, because it's kind of like you have the story of Dragon's Dogma, and then Dark Arisen is almost like a side quest per se. It's not really just like relegated as a side quest. It's got its own very big story and super important, but in the grand scheme of things, the story of the original Dragon's Dogma, even though it's inexorably intertwined with Dark Arisen, you can experience these two almost separately. Like, you can begin Dragon's Dogma and instantly jump into Dark Arisen content. I wouldn't recommend it, but you can do that if you want to. And you can even get overpowered in Dark Arisen content, then jump back into Dragon's Dogma. But I'm getting a little bit ahead of myself. As you guys can see, I'm clearly just super passionate about this series. So, number one, do you need to play the original Dragon's Dogma in order to get Dragon's Dogma 2? I don't think that is going to be necessary. I think that most likely the story of Dragon's Dogma 2 is going to be self-contained enough to the point where you can just play that if that is what you want. But the real question is, should you play Dragon's Dogma 1 before you play Dragon's Dogma 2? And the answer to that is absolutely, fundamentally, decidedly, and every other adjective that I can come up with to try and convince you to try this game out. Most likely, due to the fact that it is currently the 4th anniversary of Capcom, I'm going to assume if there's not a discount right now for Dragon's Dogma Dark Arisen, there will most likely be a discount for Dragon's Dogma Dark Arisen at some point. This game, by the way, is available on every platform, so you can get it on PS4, which will also work on PS5. You can get it on Xbox, which should work on all of the Xboxes. You can get it on Nintendo Switch, and some of you might even be wondering, oh my god, does the game run well on Nintendo Switch? Yes, it runs great. It runs fantastically, and I would highly recommend. I don't care what platform. It's also available on PC, of course. Sorry. But it's like, I don't care what platform you play it on. I cannot recommend Dragon's Dogma enough. And this is the point where you guys ask me, okay, but what's so special about the original Dragon's Dogma that makes it a game that I should definitely try out? And there are kind of like almost too many things to talk about, but the fundamental thing is, as you guys know, I'm very much driven by gameplay. The gameplay of Dragon's Dogma consists of like this open world that you go through and you can do quests in, very much like any other RPG that you can think of. These quests in a lot of ways are kind of like open-ended in a way where you don't have to do a lot of the quests in the game. If you don't have to, you can stick to the main story quest if that is what you want to. But it is very easy for you to kind of like get lost in this game. As a matter of fact, I have like not three full playthroughs, I have 3 playthroughs of the game. And you guys are like, what do you mean? Because one of them, the very first one, I was still very much noobish because like, listen, for the most, for a large portion of my life, all I've played was like World of Warcraft and nothing else. And when it came to like playing these console games, I had no idea what I was doing. And Dragon's Dogma was one of the games that I jumped in and I had no idea what I was doing. Okay. And I got lost. I got completely lost to the point where I had no idea what I had to do next. This was like the very first version of the game. So this playthrough is not complete. It's got like 24 videos, not complete. But the other two are complete playthroughs. You have Dragon's Dogma here, Double Dwarf, and then Dragon's Dogma, the second version of the Double Dwarf, because essentially what you can do in this game is when you create a character, you're essentially creating two characters. And I don't know if you're going to be creating two characters in the second one. I believe that is the case. We're going to be reading off the official website here in a second. But like, when you create your main character, you make the character to your image. And a really cool thing is that you can control everything. It's not like a lot of RPGs nowadays where it's like, well, you can control everything to a certain extent. No, in this game, you can just make whatever the hell you want. So I was legit able to just make these two really cool looking dwarves. And even though I don't think that there's like dwarven races in Dragon's Dogma or whatever, but my characters were, for all intents and purposes, just two dwarves running around, which was really cool. Now, the thing is, you create two characters, and what does this mean? So there's your main character, and then there's like your main pawn. Now, your pawn is a companion that you have with you that levels up alongside you, and you can kind of like control what class your pawn is. You can change the class of your pawn as you play through the game, which is one of the things that, like I said at the start, gameplay is king when it comes to Dragon's Dogma, and that is the really appealing part, is like figuring out what kind of synergies you can have with your pawn and then hiring pawns of other players, because that's fundamentally the way that the system works. Even though the game features no co-op whatsoever, you will basically get to create a pawn, and then you can upload this pawn into the Dragon's Dogma servers, and then other people can take your pawn into adventures, and then when your pawn returns from those adventures, even though it's like you always have access to your pawn, but like when you sleep at an inn, it's almost like your pawn was having adventures while you were sleeping, and then when he comes back, he will have knowledge of things that he experienced with the other party. So for instance, let's say somebody grabs my pawn and takes him to fight an ogre, which is a monster that I haven't fought yet. When your pawn would return, and you would go on adventures, you would encounter an ogre, your pawn would go like, it's weak to, I don't remember what the weakness of ogres was. I think that some of them would be weak to like ice. So it'd go like, it's weak to ice. Make sure to blast it with ice spells and stuff like that. Or hit him in the legs or things of that nature. It would actually tell you stuff about the monsters that he had previously fought in somebody else's game. Now, this is all optional. You don't have to necessarily accept the way that you don't have to make your pawn public. I don't remember all the things about pawns. It's been a long time since I played Dragon's Dogma last, and I've always been very freely with my pawn because I'm like, hey guys, you guys want to play with my pawn? Take my pawn out. It'll be fun, whatever. But that's kind of like the thing. And the idea is you have your party, which consists of you, your main pawn, and then you hire two more pawns, which are going to be pawns from other players. Or if you do not want to engage with other players' pawns at all, you can also just recruit pawns that are in the game to play with you. Okay, so this is just to give you an idea of kind of like how the party system works in the original Dragon's Dogma. And then the combat system is fantastic because it's got a lot of interactivity with the way in which you do combat. So for starters, if you happen to be a spellcaster, let me tell you something. No other game has done spells in the way that Dragon's Dogma did spells. All right? Like we're talking, for instance, let's say you're like a mage, you cast a frost spell. Okay? You could cast this frost spell, which I don't remember the name because I don't really play mages, as you guys are aware, right? But you could cast this frost spell that would like make like a pillar of frost come out from the ground and jab into the monster, right? And this pillar would be a physical object in the world because it's a pillar of ice. And so you could climb up to it and walk on top of it. This dynamically generated pillar of ice that you could create by casting a spell. Or you could cast meteors. It's like sky darkens, big meteors come from the sky. Boom, big explosions. Like, I am telling you that there is a high chance that you have never seen spell casting like you would have seen in Dragon's Dogma. And this is from someone that doesn't even care about spells. I don't like spell casting. But then when it came to melee, I'm sure that most of you guys have heard about Shadow of Colossus. This is a game where you climb up on monsters, then you stab them in a weak spot. You have that system in this game, except it's much more freeing. So at any point in time, you can climb, grab onto a monster. As long as you have enough stamina, you crawl on top of the monster, and then you can hack away at its weak spots. And like that, there's a million other systems that, well, not a million, but, you know, there's a bunch of other systems that kind of like interconnect like this with elemental resistances, elemental weaknesses, all of that stuff that make the combat just brutally satisfying to engage in. And there's even like synergies, even though those synergies, I've never really used too many of them because, you know, usually I would have my own strategy and I would play the game on hard mode, which meant like a monster would hit you once, like dead. Right, so I'd have to play a little bit more conservatively. But when you're playing on normal difficulty, and I'm hoping that they tune this so that a lot of these synergies kind of like come into play much more in Dragon's Dogma 2. But to give an idea, let's say, for instance, you're fighting a flying monster like the one you're seeing right there, the Griffin. Let's say he's a little bit too high that you can't really reach it. But he's high enough to the point where if you were able to do a really big jump, you'd be able to get to him. Your pawns will instinctively, and this is something that they did in Dragon's Dogma 1, and I believe that they're improving the AI system in Dragon's Dogma 2, but your pawns would be able to put up a shield to boost you, to get you to jump higher. So your pawn would like go with his shield up and he would strike now, Arisen, or say something like that. And you would be able to run up to your pawn and then your pawn would boost you and you'd be sent flying on a really big jump. And then you might even grab the monster while it's in the middle of the air and you can hack away at it while it's flying. That's the promise of Dragon's Dogma combat. And it was brutally satisfying. And then on top of it, you have this really developed vocation system where you have these advanced vocations of crazy professions that you could have, which, by the way, in terms of leveling up was not, in my opinion, the best way of doing it. So hopefully they improve on that a little bit, because to give you guys an idea, the class that you level up in would give you different stats. So if you want, and you could swap classes whenever you want, but let's say if you've been playing the whole game as like a warrior and then you swap to a mage, your character's not going to be as powerful as if you had been playing the whole game as a mage, which, you know, makes sense from a roleplay standpoint, but kind of sucks if you want to experience multiple classes in the same playthrough. But, you know, that's just to give you an idea. Another thing, for instance, was that your character's height would actually have an importance in combat. So if your character was, let's say, very light, kind of like a roguish type of thing, right? Your character's weight would be considered when he's getting attacked by a monster. If a monster is much heavier, he'd be able to like smack you and you wouldn't be able to block as well because your character's very flimsy, which makes sense, right? But on the other hand, because your character is smaller, it would also be harder to detect. So you'd be better at doing stealth things. You have a system like that. It's the same thing as like if your character is really big, you'd be able to grab certain monsters and like restrain them. Whereas if your character is really small, he wouldn't be able to do that. So there's advantages and disadvantages to this. And it's interesting because I always played as like basically two overweight short people, which is not, doesn't really give you a big advantage. But it was just a cool fantasy to do, right? So there's all of these systems that you have in the original Dragon's Dogma. And this is just kind of like an introduction to this video to give you an idea as to why so many people are excited about Dragon's Dogma 2 and why you should check out the original. It really is a really solid game that you kind of owe it to yourself to check out. Now, what I have here is the website, the official website for Dragon's Dogma 2. So I'm going to check out the information that they have on here. Then we're going to be checking out the PlayStation blog post to see if there's any other information there. Then we're going to watch the Capcom showcase, and then I'm going to do an analysis of the trailer that is shown during the Capcom showcase, okay? Also, I'm going to be pausing during those, so bear with me. But another thing is, in case you guys are curious, in case you guys are like, okay, I need to see some more gameplay, I need to see what this is all about, plenty of playthroughs on my channel. Check out any of these. I'd recommend the last one, the Runesmith and the Rune Lord, because this is like the most recent playthrough that I did of Dragon's Dogma. So if you're curious about it, check this one out. It's probably the best one. And also, here's my reaction to when they unveiled Dragon's Dogma last year, and they said that like, oh, by the way, Dragon's Dogma 2 is coming. You could chop the snake. Look at this.
ございます。
Wait.
ここで私たちから大事なお知らせがあります。
Here it comes.
お待たせしました。ドラゴンズドグマ
I
2。
fucking told you, dude. I told you, dude. I fucking told
楽しん
you.
でもらえるゲームをスタッフ一同頑張って作っています。
It was so good, dude. You guys have no idea.
Damn right. Woo! What did I tell you?
Anyway, you guys can watch that video. It's called Dragon's Dogma 2 or Riot, because that's basically what I called the video. The video when they said we're doing a presentation for the 10-year anniversary of Dragon's Dogma. It was really, really good time. But yeah, the playthrough is there in case you guys want to check that out. Anyways, continuing onwards. So this is the official website. You can see some gameplay footage in the background. We're going to be analyzing that, so don't worry too much about that. Set forth on your grand adventure arisen. So the three characters here is you have this is a pawn. This is a new race that was not available in the original Dragon's Dogma. They're called Beastren, I think. And this represents your character, the Arisen. You see the flaming heart here. That is because in the story of the original Dragon's Dogma, without getting into spoilers, because this happens really at the very beginning of the game. But in case you guys are curious, what happens to the Arisen is a dragon comes along and basically takes your heart and eats it. But your character still lives and he gains the power of the Arisen. And there's like this whole legend around what the Arisen is supposed to do and all of that. So that's why there's a fiery heart on top of your character. And this supposedly is going to be an important character in the game as well. I believe that they mentioned some of that a little bit lower in this website, so we'll check that out. But yeah, I really like the art that they're going for. But yeah, I like the original as well, so whatever. So, about the deep explorable fantasy world of Dragon's Dogma. Dragon's Dogma is a single-player, narrative-driven action RPG that challenges players to choose their own experience, from the appearance of their Arisen, their vocation, their party, how to approach different situations, and more. So, one of the first things that we need to address is this, which is something that was surprising to me, because the very first time that I played Dragon's Dogma, it seemed almost obvious to me that it was intended that the game was going to be a cooperative experience, because you have your player character and then you have these three pawns. And I was like, this should be a party of three players. But because of the limitations at the time, you're talking about this was back in the PlayStation 3 days. So I assumed that this didn't happen because of a limitation of the PlayStation 3. And it's like, we can't have three players online doing all of the crazy shenanigans that you can do in this combat. And at the time, that's what I thought. I thought, okay, this is because of limitations and, that's why they're not doing a co-op game. Eventually, they did something called Dragon's Dogma Online. I never really play that because that only came out in Japan, never came out in the West. And usually, whenever that type of stuff happens, I'm not the guy that's going to go out around and be like, oh, let me get like a Japanese social security number and jump into the Japanese servers and try to translate my way through the game. It's like, no, I'm not interested in that experience. Sorry, if you're not going to localize the game, then I'm not interested in playing it. That's just the way that I usually tackle these things. This is why I end up missing out on a lot of fantastic games, but it is what it is. Anyway, continuing onward. But with this sentence, what this tells me is that it was not a limitation of the hardware at the time, but it was more so an actual conscious choice, because I don't think that you're limited by the hardware of the PlayStation 5 or the Xbox Series X or even PC in terms of the things that you can do in Dragon's Dogma that you can't allow other players to be present in your game. It doesn't make sense, particularly because they've already done it in Dragon's Dogma Online. So this is a conscious decision that this is the design that they want. I would prefer to have at least some optional co-op in there, but if that's not what they want, that's fine. You can still bring in pawns from your friends, do all of that jazz, but it is what it is. And by the way, in terms of like multiplayer experiences, in the original Dragon's Dogma, we had this very special boss fight called the Dragon, which is a dragon that you would fight, and it would have to be fought as a community effort because you would need multiple players to deal damage to the dragon across multiple games asynchronously in order to be able to bring the dragon down, because one single player would take far too long to actually bring the dragon down. So that was also a neat little thing. It's almost like an asynchronous raid experience that you kind of get. But yeah. On your journey, you'll be joined by pawns, mysterious otherworldly beings, and an adventure so unique you will feel as if accompanied by other players while on your own adventure. This is what I told you guys about pawns. All of these elements are elevated further by physics technology, artificial intelligence, and the latest graphics made possible with RE Engine to create a truly immersive fantasy world in Dragon's Dogma 2. Now, I could be mistaken, but from my experience with the original Dragon's Dogma and all of the games that we've seen so far in RE Engine, I believe that this is the most ambitious game to grace the RE Engine. Just taking into consideration the sheer size of the world of the original Dragon's Dogma, like that, it's just this massive sprawling world. And usually RE Engine, you see it on more limited map sizes, like think, for instance, Monster Hunter Rise Sunbreak. The maps are big, but they're not like giga huge. Okay, like look, you could fit literally all of the maps in Monster Hunter Rise Sunbreak, probably like 10 times over. In the map of Grand Sorn, there's probably still room to spare. Maybe I'm exaggerating a little bit, but I actually don't think so, because the map of Dragon's Dogma is friggin' huge. So this, I think, is going to be one of their more ambitious tests when it comes to RE Engine. Let me know if I'm mistaken. Maybe I'm forgetting something, but that's the vibe I'm getting. Story begins in an underground jail where the dragon's voice echoes in the fog of lost memories. Ascend, Arisen, and best me in accordance with the dogma of this world, betwixt the domains of humans and Beastren being the race that we see here, this character. A hero must fulfill their forgotten destiny. What dogma does your heart see through your eyes? 'Tis a tale of one who shall slay the dragon and claim the throne. By the way, the original story of Dragon's Dogma, by the time you actually finish the game, it's 1,000,000% a Japanese mindfuck, okay? That's what you get. So be ready for that if you happen to be planning on playing the original Dragon's Dogma. We got some images here of the dragon, the Arisen, and pawns. The art of the Arisen looks really good. I like it a lot. This thing in pawns, this is like the symbol of the pawns. It's a little bit different than what it was in the original Dragon's Dogma. I think in the original Dragon's Dogma, this marking was different. But yeah, these are the pawns. Pawns, they're, in a lot of ways, they're not like normal people. They're kind of like, their whole thing is to support the efforts of the Arisen. So that's just kind of like their calling in life. They don't have any specific wants or needs. They're just kind of like they exist for the purpose of serving the Arisen. Or in this case, the player character. Pawns, mysterious otherworldly beings devoted to serving the Arisen. With their character uniquely determined by the player and controlled by AI, they make gameplay feel like you're accompanied by others. See, because the idea is, I'll create a pawn and I'll teach certain things to my pawn, and then you'll bring the pawn with you, and the pawn will have the knowledge that I impart on it, and it will learn from you. Then we'll come back to me with the knowledge that I learned from partying up with you, and so on and so forth. And you might be wondering, well, what's my motivation for swapping pawns? And here's the thing. While your original pawn levels up with you, the pawns that you bring from other players don't. So you're expected to swap pawns at certain intervals because eventually they get too weak to party alongside you. Now you can bring in the same pawn twice if the other player updates their pawn into the servers and whatnot, but that's kind of like the idea. Then we have here action. Wield swords, bows, and chant magic. Action that challenges your creativity. The vocations in Dragon's Dogma 2 give you the ability to approach combat the way you want, but that's not all. The terrain you traverse and the enemies you encounter will be varied and rich, whether they're suspension bridges teeming with enemies or unstable footholds leading to massive monsters. Now, a cool thing that they showed in the trailer was actually like, I think it was either an ogre or a cyclops. I'll remember once I see the trailer again. Like, he actually stomped the bridge and the bridge collapsed in a physicsy way. That was not a thing that could happen in the original Dragon's Dogma. At least if it did, I don't remember it. The world of Dragon's Dogma 2 is meticulously woven to encourage players to try different things. Good. Experimentation is key. System. Alone but together company in your single-player experience. Players will customize and take control of the Arisen. Human or Beastren, your Arisen will lead a party of up to 3 different pawns throughout their journey. Players can customize their own main pawn. Okay, so it's the same thing as in the other game. You customize your main pawn. Will always accompany your Arisen and enter a covenant with up to 2 additional pawns from other players through the network. Over time, your pawn will become a worthy companion on your journey as they learn through their experiences, adventuring with you as well as with other players, which will be reflected on their behavior. And like I said, if they follow through with what they did on the original Dragon's Dogma, even though you see the word network here, fear not, because the original Dragon's Dogma could be played completely offline. Like I said, the game automatically populates the world with other pawns that you can recruit. You just organically meet them as you are traveling through the world, and you can recruit these other pawns into your party. So you can have your main pawn, and you can just have 2 AI-generated pawns that you encounter to join your party, and you don't need to interact with other players or, use the network or anything like that. I'm assuming it's going to be the same case for Dragon's Dogma 2. But again, that is my assumption. It doesn't mean that I'm correct. Having a diverse team of pawns will allow for countless ways to play while lending a sense of multiplayer community to this single-player adventure. World, a deeply detailed, immersive fantasy world. The characters and monsters you encounter, the environments you explore take full advantage of immersive physics, character AI, and the latest in graphics. Your tale unfolds in a truly immersive fantasy world. Characters. See, these are the 2 characters that I told you guys about. Nadinia, an empress of the beast trend. This beast-like race is a new addition to the series. Okay, so this is not a pawn. She's an empress of the beast trend. Rurikhan, a woman who wields a bow with a deep connection to the Arisen. I'll be very curious to see what is her connection with the Arisen, because there's a lot of implications when it comes to that stuff. Genre, action RPG, players 1, release timing to be announced. We still don't really have a release timing. While you are waiting, may I recommend that you go ahead and check out the original Dragon's Dogma, because it's still a fantastic game. Anyway, we have here on the PlayStation blog, let's see if there's any additional information. Watch the first trailer for Dragon's Dogma 2. We intend to. Capcom's upcoming action RPG. Your adventure beckons in the deep, explorable fantasy world of the long-awaited sequel to Dragon's Dogma. Hi, PlayStation blog readers. My name is Ken Mendoza, and today I'm excited to share with you the latest trailer and details of Dragon's Dogma 2. First title in Dragon's Dogma series, initially launched in 2012. This was 11 years ago. It gained popularity as a one-of-a-kind action RPG thanks to its polished action and combat, as well as a unique system that made the player feel as if accompanied by others through pawns, mysterious otherworldly beings. Dragon's Dogma 2 follows in its footsteps, elevating these elements further to create a truly immersive fantasy world for your adventures ahead. Join us as you share more details on the game presented in a manner befitting the world of Dragon's Dogma. So we already read this part. This is the story bit. Then we have the dragon, symbol of the world's destruction, soars through the skies with his massive wings and breathes flames that scorch everything in its path. Some are terrified by its descent, while others revere it as a god. Arisen, whom the player controls. Their heart is taken by the dragon, setting them on a path where they must slay the dragon. Here you see the dragon eating the Arisen's heart. This is probably going to be one of the first things that happens in the game. You're going to have an encounter with the dragon, and the dragon is going to nom on your heart. Pawns, mysterious, otherworldly beings devoted to serving the Arisen, with their character uniquely determined by the player, controlled by AI that make gameplay feel like you're accompanied by others. Truly immersive fantasy, elevated by the latest graphics. Okay, so this is kind of like the stuff that we already read on the website. Beast Run, Beast-like Race making its debut on the series. We see a more detailed screen grab here. Many monsters that you come across originate from the legends. You'll also meet new monsters introduced in Dragon's Dogma 2. This is not a new monster. This was already present. It was the Griffin. This is a tale of one who shall slay the dragon and claim the throne. Okay, so they don't really give you a whole lot of more information. I was curious. This looks like some kind of an evil emperor. Interesting that he has like that marking on his heart, potentially an old Arisen who does not want to break the cycle. You'll understand that a little bit later. Or maybe he is trying to break the cycle. I don't know. Depends. We'll see. Okay. So that's that. Let's go ahead and jump into... Well, before we jump into this, I figured it'd be a good idea to just give you guys an idea of some of the more advanced classes that you're going to have access to when it comes to Dragon's Dogma. I'm assuming that you get all of the same vocations. So, like, you start out with one of the 3 major archetypes, which would be like a mage, archer, fighter, right? And then you get to choose an advanced version of that. So the mage gets to become either like a sorcerer or I forget what the name was, but it was a sorcerer more devoted to like healing magics and stuff like that. So those are kind of like the two paths that you would go down to. And then eventually you could become the more powerful version of the sorcerer that I forget what the name for that class was. Jesus, my names for this are terrible. I could bring up the wiki, but it's not particularly important. Then on the archer side of things, you'd be able to become an assassin, or you'd be able to go into the, what was it called? The magic archer, which was an archer that would actually shoot magical arrows and stuff like that, which is really cool. You can actually see some of that in the gameplay that you're watching here. You'll see like someone charge up these magical arrows. That was the magic archer. It should be popping up at, this is the regular archer right there. And this would be the magical archer. But we'll see more of that in the trailer for sure. But those are some of like, the magic archer would be like a more advanced class that you couldn't really give to stuff like pawns or anything like that. Only players could play magic archer. And then you would have more, there'd be like the two-handed warrior, which is kind of like wields two-handers as opposed to wielding one hand and shield and stuff like that, right? But the really cool ones, and Magic Archer was one of those, one of the really cool ones would be like, for instance, the Mystic Knight, which you would have like this big tower shield, and his whole thing would be about perfect blocking and stuff like that, and he would be able to cast these really powerful magic spells, and these, like, he could cast a ball that would stand in front of you, and then you would hit the ball and fireballs would come out of it and stuff like that. It had these really cool abilities that you'd be able to get with that. And then you would also have an assassin, which, interestingly enough, you might be wondering, okay, so Rurikhan, you'd be playing the Mystic Knight, right? And while the Mystic Knight was one of my favorite characters, I would actually tend to play more as an assassin, because the assassin had these really cool things that you could do with shields. Like, you'd have this parry that he would jump over other characters and stuff like that. There was some really cool classes that you had available to you within all the different archetypes and whatnot. My playstyle was actually having myself be an assassin with sword and shield, and then having my pawn be a spellcaster that would just rain death on anything. It was really cool. But yeah, let's take a look at the showcase here, and then we're going to analyze the trailer. For those of you that missed the showcase yesterday, look at this now. Hideaki Itsunu, the director. I got the version with the Portuguese subtitles.
First, let's take a look at the trailer we revealed the other day.
Oh, the volume's really low. Conviction is the human will that reaches the highest power. We're going to be rewatching this, and I'll be pausing in between.
You do not remember? Then have you forgotten that you protected me from the dragon's flames?
Oh.
You believe in your own destiny, Arisen.
Of course. That begs the question. If he's a mere mummer, then where might our true Arisen? Empress Nadine's
Magic Archer.
in your hands, Sir Arisen.
Praise be, for only the Sovereign's guidance can lead us true. Long live the Sovereign of Vermont!
So good, dude.
That is most unfortunate, but it doth not release thee from thy fate.
Again, we're going to be analyzing this to the best of my ability, so relax. I'll try to explain as much as I can from that trailer, from the stuff that we're watching there for the newcomers.
What did you think? The action RPG game Dragon's Dogma was released in 2012.
I think I want that
Now,
t-shirt.
A decade later, I'm proud
That's
to
what
share
I
a look
think.
at the highly anticipated sequel, Dragon's Dogma 2. Today I want to talk about two characteristics that Dragon's Dogma 2 will inherit from its predecessor. First, Dragon's Dogma 2 will be a single-player game, but with pawns at your side, it will feel like co-op. And
See, this is what I was talking about. Like, it is at the end of the day a single-player game, which is it feels like a weird thing to me. Like, I'm not against it, don't get me wrong. Like, I love the original Dragon's Dogma, so I'm sure I'm going to love this too. But I wish we could have the option, at least having one more player, two more players in there. I think it'd be really fun. But, you know, Capcom is like, nope, this is the way that it is.
Second, gameplay will feature action role-playing mechanics set in an open-world environment. In the Dragon's Dogma series, you embark on your adventures with pawns, otherworldly beings controlled by AI. Alongside the player-controlled Arisen, you can embark on your journey with a main pawn that can be customized to your liking, as well as up to 2 additional support pawns you can borrow from other players to form a party of up to 4 characters. Pawns are controlled by the AI and are now capable of even more precise decisions than in the previous.
This is a very important thing. The pawns being able to have better AI. Those of you that haven't played Dragon's Dogma, you won't understand the importance of this, but it is crucial because the way in which you tackle certain monsters has to be done in specific ways. So, like, you know how in some games you'll have like this huge monster and you just beat at its toes until it's dead? Doing that in Dragon's Dogma is not really something that you want to do. And sometimes in the original Dragon's Dogma, that is what happened. Like, your pawns would not be going for the weak points, which would make fights really, really difficult. And you would have to do all of the work yourself, which basically felt like you were carrying these pawns around. Which, by the way, in the original Dragon's Dogma, pawns could essentially die. And if you did not revive them in time, you would lose them, and then you would have to go get them again. The only pawn that you get back again is like your main pawn, but the other pawns that you'd have in your party, you'd have to go back to, I forget what the name of the place was, but there's like this place that you go to in order to get more pawns. You'd have to go back there and get more pawns in order to be able to have your party full again. So, and if you're in the middle of doing a huge exploration journey, that is actually a major problem because fast traveling in the original Dragon's Dogma was very limited, which might have made the world feel even bigger than it was now that I think about it, but whatever. Let's get to it.
Title, helping you in the midst of battle. They can also help guide you to new locations or give you a high five following a successful battle. It really feels like playing in a party with other players. Dragon's Dogma 2 is built with the RE engine, resulting in a dense world woven with high graphical fidelity. You'll enjoy a world roughly 4 times the size of the original Dragon's Dogma, with more.
I cannot emphasize how big that is. Like I said, the original Dragon's Dogma was huge. 4 times the size of the original Dragon's Dogma. Now, it's also important to mention that they're saying 4 times the size of the original Dragon's Dogma. They're not saying 4 times the size of Dragon's Dogma Dark Arisen, because Dark Arisen also has its own sprawling map in the form of like this deep dungeon that you keep going down into. So, you know, they're just talking about the base Dragon's Dogma, but still, it's going to be pretty friggin' big. If it's 4 times the size, it's going to be huge.
To experience than ever before. The characters and monsters that populate the world are given life thanks to the power of AI, and players will feel like they've been reborn in this vibrant fantasy world. You can look forward to a variety of vocations to choose from. Your vocation will shape your Arisen's role throughout the adventure. Will you take on enemies with swords?
Vocations are essentially classes.
Magic? It's all up to you. We'll have much more to share in the future, but for now, I want to go over a few sections from the trailer that show what we've improved for Dragon's Dogma 2. This game is designed to enable players to take on situations in their own way.
See, this is what I was talking about. Look at how this Cyclops is going to break this bridge and it's going to collapse.
In addition to AI, advanced technology like immersive physics brings pawns, monsters, and NPCs to life. What would happen if you destroyed that bridge, or if you pulled that monster's leg? What other exciting possibilities can you think of? meet two characters pivotal to the story that also appear in the game's key art. Ulrika, a bow wielder with a deep connection to the Arisen, and Nadinia, a high priestess of the Beast Ring, which appear in the series for the first time. What destiny awaits? How will they affect your fate? The intricate relationships and situations you will encounter in the game are sure to keep you on your toes. During your adventure, you will come across familiar monsters from the previous game, as well as new monsters such as Medusa. You can look forward to new player vocations and many new experiences unique to Dragon's Dogma 2. Please stay tuned for more information. Thank you so much for tuning in.
ありがとうございました。This is going to be a no-brainer when it comes out, team. I cannot recommend it enough. It is going to be available on all platforms, unfortunately, except for the Switch, which, Nintendo needs to come out with more powerful hardware so that we can get these games on there. But like I said, we're now going to be taking a look at the trailer, and if you thought that the gameplay didn't look particularly impressive, that is because the bitrate of these live shows is not very good. But in here, we have a 4K version of it, which I'm assuming has a higher bitrate. So we're going to be taking a look at this, and we're going to be pausing at key moments where I will be telling you my thoughts on everything that we see. Conviction is the human will that reaches its greatest power. Interesting. I didn't notice this on the original trailer, but there's actually two characters mounted on this griffin. This feels like it's going to be a cutscene in the game where you're going to be fighting a griffin and then you and your pawn are like grabbing onto it and you probably end up somewhere, maybe? That could be the case. Otherwise, I don't know why you would be riding a griffin because these are wild creatures. They're not like tamed creatures that just let you ride them. Insert Skyrim meme here. Hey, hello, you're finally awake. The world looks so good. Like when you get it into 4K with proper bitrate. So it seems like our character is going to lose its memory, and our relationship with the Archer character is we've protected her from the dragon's flame. So maybe we get a bump on the noggin and forget, or could it be that this time... Okay, I can't get into too many details because it would be story spoilers for the original Dragon's Dogma that I want you to go play if you haven't played it yet. So I'm not going to give you guys more theories.
Remember? Then have you forgotten that you protected me from the dragon's flames?
You need only believe in your own destiny, Arisen.
Of course.
So this right here is obviously a lunge from the sword user, which a lot of people recognize as the Devil May Cry Stinger, and there's other games that have like a lunge like this. But yes, this was already on the original Dragon's Dogma. It's a very common move for the sword and shield. Now, the interesting thing about the two-hander warrior is that your abilities are based around the things that you are based around the weapons that you have. And for some strange reason, the two-hander warrior only had 3 abilities versus everybody else's 6. So, like if I'm playing sword and shield, I'll have 3 abilities for my shield, 3 abilities for my sword. That guy only gets 3 abilities for his weapon. I'm assuming this time it's not going to be the same. They're most likely going to give 6 abilities to everyone. I would assume, but who knows? We'll see.
That begs the question. If he's a mere mummer...
Oh, look at this. This looks like one of the golems. Now, usually the way that you would fight the golems is they will have like these glowing discs on their bodies. So you'll have to climb on and attack the discs, break the discs. That will generate like a state in which you can just deal tons of damage. But your purpose would be to break the discs, even though it's kind of like hard to see here whether or not it is because there's a lot of like depth of field and whatnot. But this attack definitely reminds me of the golems that you would encounter. Yeah, look at it. It's made out of stone. You can clearly see the disc right here. These would be the discs that you would have to attack. So yeah, that's kind of like how you defeat these guys. You attack the glowing parts, and you have to attack the glowing parts because just like, for instance, hitting him on this leg will actually do nothing. Like actual 0 damage. Jesus Christ. These goblins look disgusting. Holy crap, dude. Now, this is an interesting spell, because I don't remember this in the original Dragon's Dogma. Like, he basically casted like this thing, which is a bubble that lifted him up in the air. And then he threw them. This might already have been a spell. Like I said, I don't really play mages. And then yeeted him at the other one. So, yeah, that's cool. This is the Magic Archer. So with the Magic Archer, the cool thing that you would usually be able to do is it's got like the Gundam lock-in style thing where you'd be able to like aim to multiple things and then just let loose and your arrows would magically find their target. It's just here it seems like he's focusing on a specific target. Yeah.
Praise be, for only the sovereign's guidance can lead us true.
Here's another important thing. Right here, notice how dark it is. And you're like, oh, they should have probably changed the brightness of the scene. No. You don't understand. In Dragon's Dogma, when it gets dark, it gets really dark. And that is intended. You have to carry around like this lantern, and then you would need to have oil to put on the lantern. And if you forgot the oil, then you can't see. So you better carry a lantern and you better carry plenty of oil, and you got to be careful with your inventory because weight restrictions were definitely a problem when it came to the original Dragon's Dogma. So keep that in mind.
Sovereign's guidance can lead us true. Long live the sovereign evermore!
Also, here's another thing. Damn it.
For only the sovereign's guidance can lead.
This right here is most definitely a new vocation. They say as much, like they showcase this particular bit of gameplay whenever they're saying there's new vocations. But because we haven't really seen this incense, this seems like some kind of an incense burner. And in this case, it seems like she's raising up a platform, like a dirt platform from the ground. And that is going to enable you to cross over this chasm. Like, you see how she makes this thing? But there you go. And this is like a mage, like casting a high-level spell. Like, look at that. Look at the meteor coming in. This is the spell that he just cast. Boom! Remember how I told you that the spells in this game are more impressive than a lot of the spells that you've seen in other games? I wasn't joking. Like, actually look at this and look at the impact that this has. You see all of these goblins here? Watch this. Boom! Let's watch the physics of that. There's somebody being yeeted over here. Like, look. Whoa! See ya, kid. There's somebody probably being yeeted in this direction. It's like, you guys have no idea how powerful and impactful these spells are. Like, just focus on this dude over here. He's like, oh! Because, like, this goes by so fast, it's easy for you to miss. But yeah, there are some pretty crazy physics. These were already present in the original Dragon's Dogma. Looks like they've made them even more powerful. Look at that goblin. See ya, sir. Here you get a couple of shots at the city. Here's another thing that I'm curious about. I'm curious as to what city the capital is going to be in. Now, the world is called Grancis. The capital, if I remember, is called Grand Soren. And there's an event that takes place in the original Dragon's Dogma that pretty much changes what Grand Soren looks like. I'll be curious to see, basically, if the Everfall is going to be there. Which would indicate whether this is a sequel or just like some spin-off or prequel or whatever. Oh yeah, and here's the other thing. You can grab onto the griffin and the griffin can just go off flying. And then you're like, oh, I better hold on because there's a stamina system. And so in the original Dragon's Dogma, you could effectively run out of stamina. The griffin would be high in the air. And this ain't Zelda. If you drop off that griffin, you're not going to pull out a paraglider. You're going to face plant into the ground and die. So you better not fall off from that griffin while it's in the air. So the interesting thing would be like, I'd jump on top of a monster and then I'd be like, oh, I'm running low on stamina. So I'd open up the menu, start eating to regain stamina and then go back to fighting. This is an ogre. Notice how this dude just straight up jumped up. He was probably propelled by one of the shield. Yeah, see how there's a shield character? Oh, you can actually see the thing I said. Look. You guys remember how I told you about the pawns using the shield to propel you? Look at this. You can actually see it in the trailer. I'm just trying to go frame by frame so that you can get to it. Let's unpause it. Okay, here we go. See, look at that. Look. You can't see the whole animation, but look at how this character jumped on top of this other character's shield. In this case, it actually looks like, because usually from the faces that you have in these characters, the face of the Arisen is usually portrayed by the character that you see in the bottom right-hand side there, the one that actually has the shield, because you'd be able to set up the thing to send pawns flying as well. So basically, it seems like the person controlling the Arisen here might have been... No, wait, the person controlling the Arisen is actually the two-hander guy, because he's the one in the middle of the camera. Never mind. But anyways, the point is, you have this pawn that's on the lower right-hand side who basically set up the whole thing to yeet somebody else into the air. And the other pawn took advantage of that, jumped on top of the shield. Notice how he's actually doing the effort to send him flying. He goes flying, grabs onto the head of this ogre, and then he's going to start stabbing at it. Like, watch him stab at it. I think he might have gone over to the back. Yeah, he's repositioning towards the backside. He's like, slash! Oh, they cut it. They cut before you actually get to see it. But you guys see what I was telling you? That's why this combat is so friggin' cool, man. That poor pawn over there. Look, there's a pawn right where the Cyclops stomps. Look, there's a little pawn crawling. He's probably downed. He needs a hand getting back up. And the Cyclops is like, nope, deleted. Crushes the pawn and breaks the bridge. This is another thing that Itsuno said in the presentation, that now pawns will give you like high fives at the end of each, not each encounter, but every now and then they just give you high fives after a particularly grueling fight. So that's what you're watching here. And it's a really cool interaction because, you know, you do kind of tend to, oh, this is my pawn. He's really cool. That's nice. So that's sweet. I like that a lot. Now, this right here, this stone is how you go to the place where you get to get different pawns. So you go in here and you get to choose 2 pawns. These cost like in-game currency, so gold. And let's say, for instance, you're level 30. If you're trying to hire a pawn that's much higher level than you, that's going to cost you more money. However, if you try to rent a pawn that comes from a friend, then there's like a discount. So they do encourage you to kind of like share pawns amongst your friends and stuff like that. I mean, Medusa is a brand new monster. We didn't really have that. There might be some kind of a mechanic where you'll have to bring like a mirror or something. That's what I would imagine. And this almost reminds me of like the Harpies, but I think they called it something else. Like I think it's called an effigy. I'm not sure, but it reminds me a lot of the Harpies because this is what the Harpies would do. They would come out, they'd have big boobies, and that's kind of like how they get you. And the cool thing about the Harpies is that they're the way in which they would deal damage to the player, they're not like trying to peck at you, because basically the Harpies is just like, it's a bird with boobs. It's a bird with a female face and boobs. And what it would do is it would grab your character, start flying, and then let you go, and gravity would kill you, which is really cool. But I don't think that this is a Harpy, even though it reminds me a lot of the Harpies. People are calling this a Sphinx, but I don't know what this thing is, but it's scary. Very, very scary. Look at those eyes. Holy crap. And look at that beautiful smile. She does appear to have some kind of a key around her neck, so you might have to kill her in order to gain access to some special dungeon or something using that key that she's got on her neck. Or it could just be an adornment. This is a griffin. And that is the dragon eating your heart, like I said. The fact that this dude's got like some kind of strange amulet around his chest leads me to believe that this might have been like a previous Arisen or something. but I don't know if that is the case. And maybe this retains his arisen powers or makes him like forever young or something like that. But this is all just, you know, speculation.
But it doth not release thee from thy fate.
And that's that. Dragon's Dogma 2. And holy crap, this video is almost 1 hour long. I am very sorry. Hopefully you guys enjoyed the video as much as I've enjoyed watching it with you guys. If you did enjoy it, then hit the like button, subscribe, bell notification icon, all of that jazz. Whenever there's news about either Dragon's Dogma or other games that I'm interested in, I'll be sure to let you guys know. So subscribing and hitting the bell notification icon is one way to always stay up to date with my content. Thank you very much for watching. I'll see you guys in the next one. Stay strong, stay safe. Peace out.